Hi, everyone. I have invited Scott Chrisman to chat with me today about what it takes to build and lead healthy teams. This is something that Scott knows a lot about. He's been leading teams for decades in the IT and software development industry, always with the emphasis on delivering results and developing people. Scott is an executive vice president of Momentum Group at Harris Computer. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Joanna. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here. You do know a lot about building and leading teams. I am curious if we could just start off by just chatting about why you think teaming or teams or teamwork is important in the first place.
Oh, look, I don't think it's any secret that you can always do a lot more with a collection of individuals that are cohesive and working together than those individuals doing things on their own, right? It's the same number of individuals, but teams can just get it done. I mean, we've seen that in sports, and we've seen that in all aspects of life, even families. Think about it. Families are teams, and they can be dysfunctional or they can be just amazing. And so, of course, in corporate life, it's true there as well. We can make money, which is important in corporate life, and we can be effective. We could also be the opposite. If they're not cohesive and they're not working together, we can actually cost a company a lot of money, and eventually we could lose the company.
Yeah, and I love that you immediately jumped into that aspect of taking a group of people who might be disjointed at first to a cohesive team. So let's talk about that. How does a team lead help a team transform from a disjointed group to a cohesive team?
Yeah, I mean, it typically starts with looking at the team that you have and ensuring that you have the right people in the right slots. And I'm not even saying if you don't, then you need to let people go. That may be the case. I am saying that sometimes it's good to move folks around into roles that they're going to be more successful in. And that's really the mark of a good leader is recognizing people's skills, recognizing what they're good and what they're not good at, and being honest with yourself and with them that some individual on your team just actually might not be good at something, and therefore they're going to burn a lot of energy. You're going to burn a lot of energy with them being in that wrong spot. Life is short. And if somebody is unhappy because they're not being successful in a job, sometimes the kindest thing is to let them go. So it really starts with looking at the landscape of what you're trying to do and making sure you've got the right team. For those that may not have a ton of experience in a certain area, well, that's okay. Because part of building a great team means that you're allowing for growth and you recognize that potential. There's a difference between somebody who is struggling to do a job that they're really not well suited for and somebody who has the potential and can grow into that position. And you know that, you sense that. Good leaders can see that. Good leaders can sense that somebody just needs a little bit of time to grow into a position or a role within their position. And then, of course, we're all familiar with forming, storming, norming, and performing. As a manager, you need to recognize what phase your team is in and coach them that, hey, we're having difficult times. We're in a storming phase. And it's okay, folks. It doesn't mean the end of the world because you believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel. You're going to come out on the other side. You need to be incredibly effective in leading your team through these very difficult challenges. This year has been a storming year for me and my team. And we just had a town hall a couple of days ago where I addressed the entire organization. And one of the main things that I addressed with the group is that, yep, it's been a tough year. I mean, even with COVID, this is the year of COVID. And there's been, even above all the challenges that we were already facing, we've been facing the lockdown challenge. Nobody can travel. You can't be on customer sites. You can't be with your teams. I can't gather my team together and have a week-long planning session like I typically have done in the past. And so we've had the challenge of doing everything virtually. There's been a lot of challenges this year. It's been a storming year, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. And it immediately brings up to my mind the phrase that you and I have tossed about when it comes to your own leadership style, which is that sense of calm that you're able to bring to others. Tell me a little bit more about how you think your leadership style helps a team pivot during a time of change.
Well, so you mentioned sense of calm. During the storming phase, I'm just going to keep going back to that because it's fresh in my mind. During the times of storming, in other words, you as a group are facing a lot of adversity and some challenges as a team. It's important that you as a leader have full control over your emotional capabilities. I'll put it that way. You as a leader are very clear and direct, and almost you have a strong sense of clarity about the direction that you're going as a group, but that you do it in a very calm way. There are times when emotion should be deployed as a leader, but I do it almost targetedly in specific moments when I know that it's going to produce the right kind of reaction that I feel that we need. As a leader, you've got to take complete control over how you feel, even though, sometimes you may not feel so hot. You check it at the door, you come into a meeting, and you provide a strong sense of calm, a strong sense of community, a strong sense of collaboration, connectedness in the organization, and you show everybody how to move forward during these times of storming.
That's really good. I keep going back to that study done by Gallup on the needs of the followers. Again, you and I think have talked about them before. The 4 needs of the followers, right? Compassion, stability, trust, and hope. And I hear that when you say you got to have that clarity, you got to have that confidence, you got to have that sense of calm. That's really good. A few minutes ago, you mentioned something about discovering what it is that makes your team members tick, what's strong about them, what gaps they might have. How do you realign yourself with them and them with you?
About a year ago, I took on a new team. And they were executives. So I'm actually managing a team of people who are pretty experienced in the areas that they're being asked to do, for the most part. I think one of the important things as a leader is to come to a position like that with a lot of humility. Do not try to be the super person in the room, because one of the most important things that you can do as a leader is to express respect for your team, which sometimes you can short circuit that expression of respect by trying to be all things, by trying to be the Uber leader, by trying to be the know-it-all. And it's almost often the opposite that takes place, where there's deference involved. You're allowing others to speak. You're allowing others to make decisions. You're empowering your team to be as effective as they can. The important thing that then reciprocates is they begin to respect you. And having respect as a leader is very critical in the role, especially if you're in very difficult situations. Everybody needs to know that you're there for them. You've got their back. You need to be respected as a leader if you're going to make it through.
That's one of the bigger challenges of any team lead, which is that eye on the results and at the same time giving the team room, to your point of failing at times, right? You and I have talked about it before. I think you're very good at that. How do you let your people fail?
That's a great topic. So there's a lot of different styles of leadership that people deploy when it comes to accountability. I start by holding myself accountable. What I mean by that is I'm quick to apologize, or I'm quick to own up to maybe a mistake or an area that is under my responsibility that didn't quite hit the mark. There's been many times this year where maybe I stepped out of line, or I said some things in a meeting I shouldn't have said. And sometimes I'll take somebody aside and I'll say, you know what, I want to apologize. That won't happen again. Or I'll say it to the team as a whole. So taking that kind of ownership and accountability is foundational, because if you're going to expect that of your team, you have to be able to model it. So if you're going to hold your team accountable and you want to have the power or a foundation of effectively calling out behavior or actions or professional activity that isn't meeting the mark, you have to be willing to do that yourself. Again, going back to, don't try to be the Uber person or the super person. At times, being the one who takes responsibility and accountability to your superiors, even when your team is the one who is responsible for doing something wrong. We improve by recognizing our failures and deciding that we're going to do things differently. That's ultimately what it's all about, right? We recognize what took place. We recognize that adjustments need to be made. This actually is a very common concept in the software industry called agile development. Mm-hmm. And in agile development, there's a phrase called fail small. And it's all about, it's okay to fail. It's just what we attempt to do is fail small, so that as you release features into your software, you release them quickly and in smaller amounts so that they can be validated. And if it's not quite hitting the mark, then you take it back to your development organization and you make some adjustments. Agile type of philosophy is now taking the industry by storm. It started in the software industry. It's now taking pretty much all of corporate America, all of business by storm, because the principle is a good one. And that principle is constantly examine and constantly adjust and improve. And that means you as a leader need to allow your team to make mistakes, and don't punish them for those mistakes, but let's talk about it. Let's dig deep. And let's talk about change.
So good. So we're now, I feel like we're naturally shifting into this whole area of communication. Let's start off with praise and recognition and feedback. Because if we're going to fail small, then the only way for us to do it is to immediately talk about that fail and then not repeat it.
I tend to focus on the things that need to be fixed and corrected. And so what I have, however, learned over the years is the absolute importance of constantly identifying where we're succeeding and where we're doing things right and where we're making a difference, and calling it out. And not just at the team level, at the individual level. This is something I had mentioned: town halls. I do quarterly town halls. And a huge part of our town halls is calling out people by name, calling out teams by name, is awarding people for certain behaviors that we really like, and people really respond to it. Even if you're not going to pass out a trophy, or you're not going to, there isn't any financial incentive, people love to see others recognized, and they certainly love to be recognized themselves. It has such an emotional impact. It has such a feeding impact. I know this is true of me. When my superiors or those outside my organization have no idea what good things are going on with me and my team, it affects me in sort of a dampening way. The opposite is true, is that when someone calls it out and someone says, way to go, it has a tremendous emotional high effect and can actually reciprocate itself in more of that kind of behavior, just better productivity overall.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And I know you are famous for your town halls, but I want to take it now back to your team. What do you think stands in the way of leaders doing praise and recognition well?
There's the organic style, and there's the more formal, let's say, framework that people can put. And I think you kind of need to do both, especially for me, because I need the framework to help me remember to do this. But at the same time, I also need to constantly remind myself to do it organically. And what I mean by that is, when I'm in a meeting and I recognize somebody has said something really amazing, say it. That's amazing. I have to constantly coach myself to do that, because again, I have a tendency, I'm a fixer, so I have a tendency to be more in tune and the things that I need to fix. So that's my coaching is some people are very natural at that. Some people are just, they're very positive in nature, and that kind of stuff comes out. As leaders, we have to coach ourselves to do that organically. But then there's the frameworks, the things that we put in place, like let's have quarterly town halls and let's just do this. I even have set myself a goal that I'm going to send out 5 emails a week to just anybody and thanking them. In Harris, the CEO at the very top of the ladder has a program where if we send him an email and we put in it the name of somebody in a team and what they did, he will then reciprocate and write a handwritten letter to this person. And to date, it's been 2,500 handwritten letters that he has sent throughout the entire company.
So good. Thanks for sharing that very specific example, because I know that others could just steal that idea away. And I love what you just brought up, that side by side praise and recognition that should be organic. At the same time, we can absolutely rely on some systems and some processes to help us keep those in places. That's a fantastic example. Okay, then right along with praise and recognition, we have giving feedback on a regular basis, or at least that's the idea. Tell me about some principles that you live by when it comes to giving your people feedback.
I know a lot of people don't like having those kinds of discussions. Most people are averse to conflict. And I just find that if we have the right kind of relationship, which is important, and I've been honest about myself, it's so much easier for me to not wait when it's time to just talk about an area that needs improvement. Sometimes it's more than just an area that needs improvement. A lot of it has to do with the severity, what we're talking about, and the impact that it has in your business. This is where I have to be careful about emotions. Because when I can get animated, I know it. If something is affecting the business as a whole, and when I mean the business as a whole, we're talking over 300 employees. And if you're doing something that can affect the business as a whole, you're doing something that could potentially affect the livelihood of 300 plus employees. And so I think sometimes it's appropriate to bring weight into the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to that trust, goes back to that stability, goes back to that respect, mutual respect. It's really good. So here's a question for you. Conflict and collaboration, are those two mutually exclusive, or do they go hand in hand?
Well, do you have a family, Joanna?
Do not ask me questions, Scott.
Okay, sorry. I won't turn it around. So yeah, I mean, any of us have been in a family, and we've all been in families. We know that conflict and collaboration is a part of any team that comes together. That's really the identification of even really good, healthy teams, is conflict and collaboration coexisting at the same time. The healthiest teams that you will find are the ones where there's a lot of diversity in thought, and the diversity is open enough where different opinions will arise quickly, and people will need to learn how to deal with that. And that's okay. You know, that's what creates the ability to get through that storming phase that I was saying. There's a difference between unity and agreement. I don't necessarily want agreement. In other words, I want to hear everything. You can disagree with each other. We can banter. We can debate. But at the end of the day, we're going to make a decision, and then we're all going to go with it. That's unity.
What are some things that you as a team lead do to help increase healthy collaboration within your team?
I think we need to find that sweet spot of when we get together. And we're actually, I told you I was new in this role about a year ago, and we decided that we were going to establish weekly cadence of team meetings. That was more than I've had in the past. In the past, I've had at least a monthly longer meeting, and it felt like there was just too much going on where we needed to get together. Now, my team, like again, is a team of executives, and it was a little unusual for me to gather the executives together weekly, but it's gone actually very well. We discovered that we could fill up 2 hours a week if we wanted to of things to chat about. We're now at the place where we're starting to scale that back, and we're still going with the weekly, but we're going to do every 4 weeks, 90-minute session, and then we're going to do 45-minute sessions. And we're going to time box it, because what can happen is you can actually overmeet, and you need to figure out what that sweet spot is in your organization. I also have one-on-ones weekly. I have 30 minutes. I think I'm looking to cut that back to 15. And I've done that in the past, where I would do my 15-minute one-on-ones with people. Find that the smallest amount of space where you feel that you can meet your goals. And I'm starting to think right now, 15 minutes a week for my one-on-ones is good. That will force us to keep things tight and connect where we need to connect, talk shop at where we need to talk shop, and move on. So there's a meetings aspect, There's also a goals aspect, right? So the meetings is more of how you connect personally and how you make sure that there's a good flow of communication between you and the team members. The goals aspect is really important. Of course, every year we establish goals at the beginning of the year. That's not unusual. We assess those along the way. Used to be you establish goals at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, you looked at whether or not you did them. Now we're looking at them on a quarterly basis. That's a better cadence for us. How are we doing after 3 months? Do we need to change our goals? Going back to the fail small concept and being more agile. Do we need to add some? Do we need to subtract some goals? How are we doing? This could be where difficult conversations arise. I feel you could be more productive if you did these things, or you could improve if you did those things. The goals need to align in your overarching vision. And what I've seen is sometimes when you go to establish your goals, you just throw everything in there that you could think of. These are all the things that we want to do this year. And what can happen is you create so much noise that you have no direction, you have no vision. I love to hike the Grand Canyon, and I use this example of hiking where when you're hiking, you're looking from cairn to cairn. Now, a cairn is a pile of rocks on the trail. So when you come to a cairn, the first thing you do is you look at where the next pile of rocks is, and you're searching either up or down for those. You spot it and you go for it. But the whole time you're seeing there's sort of a long-term vision. Okay, I'm going way down there. In fact, I know I can see the bottom of the canyon. I can see exactly where we're headed to. I will know if I'm off track because I can tell that I'm not heading to my final goal. And that's a really important aspect for us in team dynamics, is keeping track of the short term. Are we meeting those short term goals? Do we even have the right? And do those short term goals put us in the right direction in fulfilling the long term goals? That's the vision.
Thank you for that. Let me ask you one final question, and that is, what is one tip that you can give to a team lead who's just stepping into leading a team?
It's being willing to be vulnerable as a leader, diving into your competency and being strong where you're strong, and not trying to oversell who you are to your team. People typically see that. They see through it. People love confidence. So be confident, but be confident where you're strong, and then ask tons of questions. Be very curious where you may not be or you don't know. So I think it starts with being able to be vulnerable and be willing to be very open about who you are as a person and a leader.
So good. Thank you very much, Scott. I so appreciate your time, your wisdom, and the principles that you have tossed my way and everyone else listening to us. Thank you.